What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods, or in the mountains, or in deserts, or caves, basically anywhere? Story number 1. I was on a backwoods backpacking trip some years back with friends, and we stumbled upon a very makeshift and rundown cabin. There was no indication that anyone had been there in a while, but out back there was a hand-carved cross that looked like it used to be a grave marker. Also several old food tins and some broken whiskey bottles. Story number 2. I hadn't thought of this memory for so long. When I was young, my family lived out in the country in rural Minnesota. We had acres of land. My brothers and I would often explore our land and the land around us. One day we came across an old, dilapidated, run-down house/cabin. We walked cautiously because the floorboards were rotted and moldy. But what I remember the most were the bottles of old orange prescription pill bottles everywhere. Open a cupboard, they'd fall out. In cabinets. Under the table. In the sink. Under makeshift furniture. It was bizarre, but every bottle was empty from what I recall. Just hundreds of empty prescription pill bottles everywhere. Some people who craft save up those bottles to keep supplies in. Maybe this person was a very specific kind of hoarder? Story number 3. My mom grew up in rural Mexico. My grandma was pregnant virtually every year for a long time and had quite a few miscarriages. They were all buried in the massive backyard I used to play in with my brothers and cousins. That's how botchlings are created. I've heard that some backwoods folks used to bury stillborns like that. Sad stuff. Story number 4. This was almost a decade ago. I live in a town outside of Phoenix, Arizona. It was late in the afternoon as the sun was starting to set. I went out in the backyard to smoke a cigarette and play fetch with my dog. As I was throwing the ball, I noticed a small orb shoot from the ground directly into the sky. A few seconds later another one followed, and another, and another, and another. It didn't stop for a few minutes. At first, I thought it was a Roman candle, but I just couldn't hear what you'd normally hear them fizzing as they fly. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silent. To this day, I still don't know what those were. Congratulations, you saw earthquake lights. There's no good consensus on why they happen, other than to say it's likely a plasma discharge of some variety. You're very fortunate. This is a semi-rare occurrence. I'm imagining this being said in a robotic voice by a man in black. Story number 5. Not sure if this counts, but here goes. I live in my family home, which is to say my great-grandpa built it and his family lived here all their lives. 2 people have died in here, my great-grandpa and my aunt, both from complications due to stomach cancer. One small but important detail is my aunt used a lot of baby powder to keep herself smelling pleasant, and doubled down on it when the cancer worsened and she lost control over her BMs. Around 4 years ago, I had some friends over for game night and one friend, let's call him Bill, says he smells baby powder. This happens on a semi-frequent basis here. There's even a whiteboard with how many days pass before someone smells it again. Currently we're at a 49-day streak. We continue on with the game for a couple more hours, and Bill excuses himself to the bathroom saying the smell is making him sick. When he comes out, he tells us he saw blood in his puke. We end the game there and his then-girlfriend takes him to the ER. We found out a couple weeks later that Bill had a malignant tumor in his stomach. It was operable, thankfully, and he's been doing great, but timing is definitely creepy. Bill and his now wife are pretty well convinced the place is haunted, but that doesn't stop any of them from game night. Helpful haunting? I could see a grandma do that. It almost sounds as if your aunt was warning your friend if he smelled the baby powder so strongly. Story number 6. Lived on a ranch in the mountains. Used to take the trash out early in the mornings. One morning, I'm walking to the dumpsters and I see a massive mountain lion laying on top of the dumpsters. Guess he wasn't too hungry, because I'm still writing this. If you eat the people, it cuts into the trash supply. Yeah, but you eat good for a little while. You know the saying, give a mountain lion a human and he'll eat good for a little while. But show him not to eat a human so that there will be more garbage to eat on forever. Story number 7. I was up north. Far north British Columbia, Canada, working in a rig camp out in the woods. I was working as a cook. I went out one afternoon for a smoke on the back deck. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a very quiet, still winter day. It was snowing, those kind of big snowflakes that make it look like the world is moving in slow motion. So as I was standing there smoking, just staring off in the distance, not looking at anything particular. You know, looking left, right, up, down, at my feet, whatever, I felt something looking at me. Then I looked straight ahead. About 30 feet or less in front of me was the tree line of the forest, and directly in front of me, in between 2 trees, I see the most gigantic wolf I have ever seen. This thing sitting looked like it was the size of a man standing. It was massive, sitting there and just staring right at me. We locked eyes, then I looked away for a split second and then looked back and it was gone. I don't know, it just gave me the weirdest feeling. It was definitely like, hey, I see you, I could eat you, but I won't, 'kay, bye. Something I'll always remember. Story number 8. So, before I get into this, I need to throw a disclaimer out there that I was 18 years old when this event took place. I have never done hard drugs in my life, I don't drink alcohol, and I started smoking weed when I was 22. Also, there were 3 other teenagers with me that night who were also sober and witnessed this as well. So, my friend and I were hanging out with 2 of her guy friends Friday night after school, and the plans were that we were having a sleepover at my friend's house. We were just hanging out around town, nothing much to do in a small Georgia town, but walk around the town square and go to the trails. Well, after shooting the poop for a couple of hours, we got hungry and ordered a pizza for pickup. We got the pizza and drove to a pretty quiet neighborhood where one of the guys lived. The neighborhood was kinda tucked away into a forest, so it was really quiet and really dark in that area of town. As we were sitting there outside, eating pizza, using the hood of the car as a makeshift table, I looked up and saw what looked like a large, pitch-black mass that resembled a primate in shape and movement, swinging high in the trees that had to be a good 800 feet away from us. Even from that distance, in the night, it looked so huge. But that made no sense as we live in a small town in Georgia. There are no large primates here. I alerted everyone to this figure in the trees, and we were all baffled and amazed at what we were seeing. I remember just having this sense of dread washing over me as I looked at this figure, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. Then, it seemed like it noticed us. We couldn't see any distinct features, and the figure was pitch black, but somehow, you just knew that it was watching you. Suddenly, this shadow, ape-like figure stood tall, and you could almost see it shifting before your eyes, as it began to resemble more closely the shape of a large man, holding onto a branch with one arm, just staring at us with unseen eyes. Everyone was frozen, so still, and so quiet. It seemed like the sounds of the night froze in place with us. We were just transfixed on this dark figure in the trees. Then, this creature crouched over, and as it did, its shoulders seemed to stretch impossibly higher, reaching over its head. All of us were in shock and terrified at seeing this, maybe a little in denial as what we were seeing was defying any logical explanation. Because you want this to make sense. And then this. Creatures. Shoulders, for lack of a better word or better way to explain this, seemed to just grow into these huge wings, Then this dark figure jumped off the branch and flew off. I knew what I was seeing was real, because when that happened, we all ran to the car without talking, just screaming, as fast as possible, and speed away from there. We were all freaking out, trying to find any logical reason that could explain what we had just witnessed, but there was none. Needless to say, no one slept that night. We were all too terrified that maybe that thing follow us back to my friend's house. I should also mention this was back in 2010, so no good camera phones to capture whatever we saw back then. Yikes, reminds me of Jeepers Creepers movie. Story number 9. I lived in a creepy apartment for a few months. Sometimes the sink or shower would turn on, but most of the experience was hearing sounds. Bumps, bangs, that sort of thing. I was always scared of being there by myself, so I'd always try to talk friends into staying over. Old pipes? My shower drain talks to me sometimes. Thanks for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed hearing about some of the creepiest things our Reddit friends have seen. If you have your own spooky story to share, feel free to leave a comment below or send us a message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more scary content like this. Also, be sure to check out some of our other videos by clicking on the links on the screen. Until next time, stay spooky.